Hello, good night. Welcome
Good
to
evening.
Legalize this 16th day of November 2025. And tonight we are expected to have a very informative program. It is in keeping with our mission, which is to bring everyday issues under the eyes of the law. Issues that people may even consider as unrelated to the law. We want to bring those issues, and we have been doing that for the last 2 years. And tonight we will go down that road a bit more. But before we start tonight, I just want to recognize those who assist us in keeping this program going week after week, namely Gel Professional Solutions Inc., Jim FM carrying this program on FM radio out in Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAM.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
So tonight, along with my co-hosts, we have Dr. Sonia Nixon and also Mistress Nicole Forster. And welcome both of you. And I will just allow my co-hosts to introduce each of you, and then we'll ask you for opening comments, and then we'll seek to delve into this topic of great interest.
So, good evening, everyone, and good evening to our guests this evening. I will be reading the bios of Dr. Sonia Nixon and Mistress Nicole Forster. And I'll start with Dr. Nixon. Dr. Nixon is a graduate from the High Institute of Medical Sciences of the University of Havana with a degree in medicine. Most of her career has been dedicated to primary and preventative healthcare. In 2012, she achieved a Master of Public Health degree from Boston University's School of Public Health, focusing on social and behavioral science and global health. Since her return to Grenada in 2016, Dr. Nixon has focused on primary prevention of non-communicable chronic diseases, engaged as a senior medical officer in the Ministry of Health, serving as interim chairperson of the Grenada Cancer Society while working with other community-based health organizations like Grenada Diabetes Association. She initiated and participated in research focused on knowledge and behaviors related to COVID-19 in Grenada, provides ongoing education of the Grenadian public on matters related to disease prevention and early screening. She led the consultation and aided in the development of the Grenada National Childhood Prevention Policy and is an active member of the Grenada National Non-Communicable Chronic Disease Commission. She became a member of RCG in 2021. Dr. Nixon is passionate about patient empowerment, provider education and capacitation, research and application of local information for health system strengthening. And we welcome you, Dr. Nixon.
Thank you.
Now the bio of Mistress Nicole Forster. She is an international lawyer who works at the intersection of law, human rights, and non-communicable disease, with focus on small island developing states. She is passionate about people-centered development, and about the role of law as a tool for achieving social justice. Her work bridges research, policy, and advocacy, helping governments and institutions design equitable, evidence-based responses that protect public health and promote sustainable development. Nicole holds a law degree from the University of the West Indies, the University of law degrees from the University of the West Indies, University of Cambridge, and Washington College of Law. She has served as chancellor with the Barbados mission to the WTO and United Nations in Geneva, as NCD and mental health advisor with the Pan American Health Organization, and is currently a law lecturer and founding head of the Law and Health Research Unit at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus. And welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, so welcome to both of you, and again, we want to thank you for agreeing to appear. And I know that this topic, well, I should say this topic was really inspired by the fact that it was Friday gone, Sonia?
Yeah.
Was International
World Diabetes Day.
World Diabetes Day. And want us to be conscious of I am conscious of the fact that diabetes is silent, but it is ever present in our society. And it is something that people don't speak about much, but it is there. And hopefully the hope is to bring it to the forefront in these kind of discussions, and by shining a light and shining a legal eye on it and bringing it into sharper focus. So good night, Sonia. Good night, Nicole. Good night once again, Aisha. And the floor is yours, Sonia or Nicole. Which one of you want to comment?
I'll let the doctor start first.
I was going to let the people from overseas start first, but it's okay. Thank you. Good evening to Grenada. Good evening to everybody who's listening, especially those in the diaspora. And Ms. Layne, I want to thank you for bringing this up, because I think having Ms. Forster here tonight is very important, because when we talk about whatever disease, we think about just taking care of a disease, the doctor, the community, the patient, that kind of stuff. But there's so many other levels on which we have to approach disease, especially our chronic diseases. Those are the diseases who usually are not eliminated by vaccines. Usually, I say, because some of the cancers, we are discovering more with research that we can prevent some cancers by vaccines. That would last for more than 3 to 6 months. And often you require lifestyle change. And often they're motivated, they come on because you may have a predisposition, but because of lifestyles, we have these diseases that last for us. That you require to change the way you live and behave in order to have any control. And if you don't, it is very likely that these diseases will progress to having a lot of complications and eventual death. And often, in the case of diseases like diabetes, premature death. And premature death occurs in anybody who dies before the age of 70. I guess we keep it in the Bible, but the truth is, you shouldn't die before 70. The life expectancy, well, from Grenada, I know, is for men for 71 years old and women 74, 75. The truth is, in places like Japan, it's much, much higher than that. What is the difference? When in 2000, in the early 2000s, our Caribbean leaders recognized that these chronic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, their complications, cancers, and complications, which all cause premature death, but not just death. They also cause a lot of hyper use of the little bit of money that we have in the society. We know that our budgets never reach to where we would like it to extend as far as taking care of the health of our population. And here we have diseases that are often preventable, taking over the limelight. But not only that, causing premature illness or morbidity and causing premature death, and also being very, very expensive. So what happened at the end of the day, we saw our economies being severely affected. So the Caribbean governments take it to the UN high-level meeting. They come back. We have the Caribbean, the CARICOM Convention, the Port of Spain Convention, which asked all the islands to set up facilities, set up systems that can support each government into making sure that we take control of chronic disease. Have we really been? Some people are a little more, a little more success than others. Of course, it's going to take funding, it's going to take human resources, it's going to take a whole lot, especially education and support for people who have diseases, who do not have diseases, just intervening in our community because these diseases are so already prevalent. We know that by 2030, 30% of our population may have diabetes.
What
And that's
percent?
not 30. So 1 in 3 of us will have diabetes. We know that we're living longer because we don't have, well, we didn't have the infectious diseases which cause early childhood death, premature death because of infections. Because since the advent of antibiotics and more so with the advent of vaccines, so people are actually living longer. The longer you live, the longer the greater the possibility of developing a chronic disease. That's where we are today. However, in order to intervene, there are levels at which interventions have to occur for not only for prevention but also for management of diabetes, and that goes across what we call a socio-ecological grain, from the individual to the families to the communities to the workplace, and above all, at the top tier is the people who make policy, and that's where Nicole comes in very importantly, because sometimes we think it's just government just make decisions, but there aren't really. The framework doesn't exist. What policies do we just say, let's give everybody diabetes medication? Let's make sure they have medication for diabetes because everybody's having diabetes. Or do we ensure that we employ the Alma Ata Convention and make sure that our primary care services are perfect, right? As and
The
accessible
what
to all our
convention?
countries. Alma Ata came from the
Okay.
World Health Organization, PAHO, in 1978, which really focused on primary care as a principal way of maintaining health of our populations. We still struggle with implementing that because not all of us have very strong primary care services. Okay, for whatever reason, whether it's investment funding, whether we have the human resources, whether we have the structure, whatever it is, we still don't have it.
At my primary care, we're speaking about at the basic
The
village
basic
level.
primary care, which really
Home.
focuses a lot on prevention through
Okay.
education, through ensuring proper nutrition and all of those basic stuff, and even and screening early for disease, and that when diseases are found, that we can still manage them and prevent complications. All of that can happen at primary care level. We still lack it in Grenada and probably in the wider Caribbean for many reasons, right? But we 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 are faced with a crisis in Grenada because of the lack of that structure. And you can say, yeah, and we need more medications. Yeah, we need this. But unless we can structure a system to be able to deliver from a preventative level, and to go all the way up to a policy level, and all of these levels interacting appropriately, we're going to have challenges. Friday was very important for me. It was very interesting because I saw the workers. I saw the unions. I saw us looking at diabetes in the workplace. And I heard Nurse Saint Bernard give a very good discourse on how we support each other, how we support people with diabetes. But we still lack that thing, that je ne sais quoi, that thing where people accept that they have diabetes and they seek care, and that and access is available for them to get care, right? We still lack that open-mindedness towards disease. And we're speaking about diabetes, but talking about chronic diseases in general. Open-mindedness about disease, where we can provide what people recognize. I have a disease and I need to have care, and the people who provide care know that care. This is what is required of us to ensure. We need food security. You can't tell me to not eat pasta and ramen and rice and flour when there is no green bananas and breadfruit and vegetables and all the rest of it. So how do we relate? How do we apply what the World Health Organization has implied? Applying health in all policies Where do we include sports? How does the Ministry of Health and its new sports council, where do they come in ensuring that chronic diseases are maintained? There must be an interlacing of all the parties in order for us to have success. But I want to stop here and let Nicole take the hot seat. Thank you. I'll talk
Okay,
about what diabetes is about after. Sorry, Nicole, because I think we have to spend a couple minutes. But let Nicole introduce her field.
yeah, so thanks, Sonia. That's a useful backdrop, I guess, against which to pick up. So often persons don't quite understand what law has to do with it in the context of discussions about health and NCD care and management in particular. I often get the question, Law and Health Research Unit, what do y'all do? How do those things go together? And so I want to pick up the part of Sonia's, because really to illustrate the powerful and really critical role that law plays in this whole debate.
Come on, what's up?
Appreciate that we have to go back to the point that one of the points that Sonia made just now, which is to say that realistically, we know our levels of NCDs are very high. And this is not just in Grenada, this is across the region. We have some of the highest rates of premature mortality from NCDs in the Americas. And so that comes with a certain cost, right? Because we have the cost of the hospital care, we have the cost of the medication if you're not so bad that you have to go into hospital. We have the indirect cost of the lost days at work, and the person who has to stay home to take care of you, and all of those things. And we know realistically that we're small island developing states with limited funds, and therefore we cannot treat our way out of this problem. There is not enough money in the world for us to be able to provide the level of treatment that would be necessary for persons within our territory, bearing in mind the trajectory that we see, right, in terms of the increasing incidence of NCDs and all the complications associated with it. And when we think about diabetes, we think about your eyes, pretty much every part of your body. Sonia could give you all the details, but my mom was a diabetic, so I know, she was an amputee. It didn't affect her eyes, but I know many people it affects their eyes in terms of their ability to see. It can affect your heart, etc. So all sorts of costs there. And so really realistically, where law comes in this space is to say, look, the answer to this question, yes, this is a medical problem, but the answer does not lie in treatment alone. The answer lies in prevention. The answer lies in creating environments that allow persons and facilitate persons doing better, making better decisions, eating better, exercising more, all of those things that we know help in the context of reducing levels of obesity and also, the other risk factors as it relates to NCDs generally and diabetes in particular. And so when we're talking about law and NCDs, we're basically moving the conversation, as I said, from the treatment end, and we're focusing it at the prevention end and saying, what can we do, recognizing and law has been really important as well in terms of changing the narrative, where for so long the narrative was just do better. It's your fault you're fat. It's your fault you have diabetes. It's your fault, you need to just eat better. You just need to exercise more. And what we've come to realize is through a better appreciation of what we term the commercial determinants of health, we recognize that the environment in which persons live really has a significant impact on their ability to do better, right? And so we want to have law now coming in, because that's what law does best, right? Regulate behavior, right? Regulate environment structures. And so we have law coming in, and helping. So yes, the individual, we're not saying that the individual doesn't have a role to play. You absolutely have a role to play as an individual. But what we're also saying too is that government through law has an obligation and a responsibility to help people in that process, to use law to create environments which support the types of decision making that is needed for us to sort of really have an impact in terms of our levels of NCDs, and therefore hopefully, start to begin to manage a little better the costs associated therewith. So if we think, for example, just something like, so in Barbados, I'm Barbadian, I live in Barbados. In Barbados, in our last budget, the government has introduced, so we already had an SSB tax, so a tax on sugar sweetened beverages, since about 2015. And that was increased in 2018 from 10% to 20%. And then now the government has also complemented that now with additional taxes now on certain foods that are high in salt. Because we know that basically the culprits in the context of our epidemic of NCDs is foods high in salt, fat, and sugar, right? And so we have through law, right, use law as a tool to help, because we pass legislation, which is law, and say, okay, we're going to have a certain amount of taxes that go on these products in the hope that it dissuades. But also, to as Sonia was saying, we don't want to just take away and we don't put back, right? That we leave people without options. And so we equally use law through our customs duties and all of these things. So a number we have in Barbados, for example, a basket of goods for which certain duties are taken off, certain VAT is removed, to create that breathing space to allow persons to do better. So there are a number of other ways in which, just to quickly mention, we can think about things such as school nutrition policies, for example. So putting in place systems within our schools that don't put our children in the unfair and unenviable position of having to choose between, because we know this stuff tastes good, right? There ain't no two ways about it. It tastes good. And saying to them, no, you mustn't have the whatever is the snack or the sweet thing or whatever it is that we are not predisposed to like. And instead you must have, a salad or something like that. And so instead what we're trying to do is to create environments where we regulate that space better, so that what is offered to our children is more in line with what is appropriate. But then also too, and really importantly, law is then being used as well. And we're in Barbados right now in the process of trying to get to the stage of getting some legislation in place that would regulate the marketing of these things to our children. Because that's a big part of the problem, right? All of these unhealthy foods have huge budgets behind them as it relates to advertising. And so once again, then law comes in there to say we can create spaces, so in the context, for example, of our schools, the Barbados School Nutrition Policy says there to be no marketing of unhealthy food or beverages to children in or around schools. And marketing here doesn't mean just, I come and give you $2 for whatever snack and you give it to me, but it means all the other things that we're so familiar with, the backpacks with the branded names, the cartoons, all of those things that are very deliberately structured to entice our children and let the nag factor come into play. Mommy, please, 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 I want X, or, I want whatever character. Yes. And so we're saying no within our school spaces at least, and it's a gradual process. We would hope to get there eventually, even beyond the schools, and protect our children within society as a whole. But law is used in that space. That's just one, besides something with, the tax might not be the most exciting example for persons of law at work, but certainly something I know, something like anything to do with our kids will resonate with persons across the board. And so certainly we have seen law playing a really important role there. And actually within the coalition right now, the Barbados Childhood Prevention Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition, we're actually now pushing for legislation.
Yes, that's quite exciting what you say there. For somebody who I consider myself a student of law and policy, how law could be used as a social engineering tool. It's quite exciting. Aisha, you want to come in?
Yes. I was particularly entertained by Miss Forster when she mentioned the way in which sugar is marketed, and it's marketed in a pretty positive way, especially to younger children, and that's where it starts. Mrs. Foster, based on your work, we want to know some of the research. What have you been seeing in the Caribbean region as it pertains to legislation to assist with and I want to call it the sugar crisis?
So this is exactly the point. We're very much at the beginning of the journey, right? So none of us have legislation. So Barbados, we have the SSB tax. Dominica has a tax on certain sugar products, and there's one other Caribbean one that I think
Grenada.
Grenada.
Mm-hmm.
But we are very much at the beginning stage. And when you look at, just linking back once again to Sonia's earlier comments, so we had the Port of Spain the Port of Spain declaration, right, where our heads understood that all of these things needed to be addressed, and we've had one or two, statements coming out of the government's meetings. But when we had the Port of Spain evaluation document, 10 years, so Port of Spain was 2007, 2017, when we had the evaluation, the areas where we were doing the worst were exactly these areas, the areas about marketing, the areas about, regulating the food environment. And so we've really, as civil society, those organizations that form part of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, which of course is a regional network of CSOs working in this area. As I said, Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition, a number of other civil society players, we've really been pushing and trying to get our governments to act in this space. And we are seeing some results, but we're very much at the beginning. As I said, Barbados, we have the legislation on SSBs. We've just now introduced additional one on salt as well. We're hearing that Antigua and Barbuda is going to introduce an SSB tax shortly, and they say they're going to do more than any of us have done. So fingers crossed, we're watching that space. So we're getting a little bit of momentum, and then also to equally from the sugar perspective, but more broadly also salt and fat, we have the school nutrition policies, and we've been seeing useful movement there. Trinidad and Tobago, for example, they were one of the first that sort
Grenada
of
also has been a long
that
time.
that restricted the sale of these types of sugary drinks within their schools. Jamaica has a policy. Barbados, we have a policy, etc. So it's baby steps, but the idea is that we want to encourage our governments to keeping on, because obviously there's oftentimes pushback, and oftentimes I think it's important to say, sometimes I must say overall we've had a very positive response in terms of our engagement with the public within Barbados. But sometimes you get the pushback or the immediate, why are you up in my business? I'm the parent. I get to decide what my child, why you don't get to tell me what my child is to take to school or not to take to school. And what we're trying to get persons to understand, and governments to understand, is how we are trying to use law to change the narrative, where we're making it about the rights of our children, their right to education, their right to health, their right to life. And for those things to happen, certain things have to be put in place. And it's not a situation where the government is trying to take over what parents should do. What you're trying to do is to get parents to work along with health practitioners, with the government, to create to reinforce the types of decisions that we know that the evidence tells us from WHO, PAHO, all of these places are the types of decisions that we need to be taking to protect our children, but just us more broadly as well.
Dr. Nixon, again, I'm going to piggyback off of something Mistress Foster said just now in relation to children again. What are, well, if you know, and if you can share with us the statistics in relation to childhood diabetes, because I realize that that is becoming a prevalent thing in our society as well. You're hearing a lot of young kids suffering from diabetes. So if you can share, if you have any.
So I don't have all numbers, but what I can tell you is because of the challenges we had with our children's nutrition, we're now seeing our adolescents or a younger population developing what we call adult onset diabetes. So there are two types generally. There are a little more, but two types that we look at. Juvenile diabetes, which occur in people who have genetic challenges. They don't have a developed pancreas, which produces insulin that controls your blood sugar. That's one. So that you can't help. You're born that way. You're born that way. And I think we lost them both. But uh,
Right here, sorry, I was just having a sip of water.
sorry. Um, we have juvenile diabetes, and then we have adult onset diabetes, and it's exactly that. It usually happens at a much older age, late 30s, early 40s. We are, however, seeing by doing examinations on our children, you have in a school health programs, we're seeing a younger population having diabetes. What does that mean? That you have complications a lot earlier. Let me just run through the whole thing of why we have diabetes.
Hmm.
So, um, diabetes is a disease that results from your body's inability to use its energy sources. So we need energy, right? So if you went and check your blood sugar and they said it's 106 milligrams per DL, that's just a unit to use, okay? Um, you will see a range, the normal range, which is 70 to 100. Okay, or 100, that depends on 110. All right, you'll see a range. So it means that this is something that is essential for your body to live. You need sugar for energy. Where do you get your sugar from? Carbohydrates, right? Provide sugars and starches. So your starches, your bread, your pasta, which is not good for you, your breadfruit, your all of those starchy stuff, right? Crackers, the things we eat. Some of the root crops and things like peas and beans can give you a certain amount of carbohydrates as well. And then you have sugar, which you get out of fruits and which you get out of sodas and all the bad drinks that they tell us we need to eat. And one of the things that Nicole forgot to mention is how they sell it, they use it, how the people who provide it use it to make us. So when we have sports, we see a sugar company, a sugary drink as a sponsor. For me, that's ethically incorrect. Okay, but that's me. I'm speaking of Sonia Nixon. Um, though that's one of the areas that we've really had to come to grips with and to see how we can focus. Because the bottom line, it has become quite pervasive. It's almost in every part of the world, every country. And unless you have legislation that controls that, you're going to have problems. Okay? Because the people who provide sugary drinks also provide water. Let's get real. Um, so people need carbohydrates for energy. If you don't have glucose is your currency, right? For your energy. So you can get up and go drive your car, you could wink your eyes, you could sing, you could go on your computer and do it. You need energy. All right. When you consume a food that contains carbohydrate, your brain says, hey, um, Nicole just had a slice of bread and some cream cheese. Or sweet bread. Let's go really beach. And she just had some sweet bread with a cup of tea. I said, oh, she has carbohydrates on board. Immediately, the pancreas, the organ that provides insulin, and insulin is made in the beta cells of the pancreas. Says, okay, I'm on board. And your body provides insulin. The duty of the insulin is after your body breaks down, it doesn't matter how complex the carbohydrate is, whether it come from breadfruit, whether it come from dumpling, whether it come from sugar sweetened beverages, like a soda. I'm not calling anybody's name, right? All of the carbohydrates break down to glucose, which is your currency of energy. That is what goes into your muscle, goes into whichever organ needs it for its duties. However, you absorb it out of your gut into the bloodstream passively, right? And the digestion of carbohydrates takes place from the mouth and into the stomach. That's where it happens. Okay, it's absorbed from the stomach and gets into the bloodstream. But in order for that sugar, that glucose that you have circulating now, to get from the bloodstream into your muscle, your eye muscle, the nerve that does your air, so you can hear, whatever it is, insulin is a facilitator. Insulin is who takes it through to the organs, the tissue that needs glucose for their function. So your brain, it doesn't matter where it is that you need some glucose or some energy. All right. If the insulin is not present, like you already eat all them sugar sweetened beverages when you're small and kill all the beta cells because they're working too hard over time, or like we say, if you were born with a underdeveloped or no pancreas and you don't have beta cells to produce insulin, whatever reason, if you have poor quality insulin, that sugar remains in your bloodstream. And the sugar that remains in your bloodstream can be quite toxic. But also, you still need the energy. And you eat more. You feel I need to eat more because I eat and I eat and I eat and I eat and I can't get any. I don't feel satisfied simply because that food that glucose is not getting to its final place. But
It's
that
not being distributed.
is not distributed. It's not going to where it's needed. There's a block because you don't have the insulin to hold its hand and take it into the cell. And you keep eating more, and your sugar gets higher, and that high sugar is toxic. It's poisonous. Okay, and it produces a lot of the things that we see, like damage to your brain, damage to your eye, damage to your. I'm going from the top to the bottom, so people remember: damage to your brain, damage to your eye, damage to your heart, damage to your kidneys, and of course the limbs where the blood lasts. Simply because that surplus of sugar sticks onto those red blood cells that we need to carry oxygen around, right? Sticks on the red blood cells stick onto each other because they have all of the sugar. So it goes from try to imagine, the guy on TV who mixes pizza and you see it move and the dough moves all around. And then at one point, after the pizza is made, the dough can't move anyway. It's stiff. And that sugar that sticks onto that red blood cell, apart from the toxic effects on the lining of the blood vessels, that sugar now makes the red blood cells hard and it can't take oxygen in. And it occludes, it blocks up, right? The small blood cells. We get strokes, we lose the vision because those little fine blood cells don't have those little fine arteries, right? Don't have they don't have the enough space for all these cells are cut up together, and the cells that can flex to provide oxygen and to provide the nutrients that our system needs. And that is where the problem starts coming on. So try to imagine when we were still eating and walking and not taking bus from down at the bottom of St. John Street to go up to Convent and PBC and Heinzie School. We were exercising a little and burning out some of that thing, and we are doing better. Now our children don't do that. They sit, they eat, they play, they watch TV, they play on their handheld games. So, and they eat all the wrong things, all of those foods that make your blood sugar really super very high. So try to imagine if you were 40 years old and you had diabetes, early started diabetes at 40, that's when you debut as a diabetic. Probably by the time you're 60, 70, you'll have some renal damage. But if you're 13 and 14, by the time you're in your early 30s or late 20s, your kidney already start having challenges, especially if that sugar is not controlled. Because those red blood cells are really under a lot of pressure in your kidneys, where all the blood goes to filter. And those units in your kidneys can't work as well because the circulation is so poor. And those nephrons, as we call them, start becoming hypofunctioning. They cannot function as well. And your kidney starts dying. But it happens at an earlier age. And hence, you hear Nicole speak a lot about childhood obesity management. That is why there's such a great campaign, a lot of work, a lot of trying to make policy to ensure that our children receive the nutrition that they deserve. Yes, you can eat something sweet, but you can't eat soda and crackers and sweet biscuit every day. Plus, you need to have full nutrition. You need your micronutrition, your micronutrients. You need your proteins. You need all the rest. And our children have not been eaten like that, right? And we have had several. Even in Grenada, there have been efforts. We have had a school nutrition policy for a long time. Our school nutrition policy was probably done in 2000, 2005, 2015, something like that. It was 2015. Again, reintroducing into schools, healthy schools. There's a healthy schools program where the pilot schools. If you talk to the kids at St. John's Catholic school, right? They have a very healthy nutrition program. They don't buy sugar sweetened beverages in their school. The kids have they understand why it is important, and they have an excellent program going on in that school. This is what we want to see. Our school nutrition program also includes incorporating the people who sit around the school. Yeah, everybody needs to live, but our children don't need to die because you need to live. That is my opinion. Okay. So we've included them. We've taught this food, the Food and Nutrition Council has done a lot of work with people who sit around the schools. There's a lot of work with the people who provide foods in the school so that our children can understand why our children need this kind of nutrition. Our children spend 8 hours in school. That's why they eat a lot of what they eat. We have to ensure that we have the policies, ensure that we have the food we have that food security that ensure that our children, when they go to school, they don't have to eat pasta. Well, I don't know, pasta is flour and water, so they're just as good as eating dumpling as far as I'm concerned. But we have to ensure that there are standard healthy foods for our children to eat. And the school nutrition policy, we used to have a school feeding program where children who were not as financially able, come from families, there were food provided for them. They always thought it was substandard. I don't know that so because it's supposed to be balanced from a nutritional standpoint. It is hoped that the school nutrition implementation of that policy will make sure that the food across the board is good food. Have you seen what the Koreans give to the South Koreans give to their children in school? You'll be surprised. They eat food like they're in a hotel. There's vegetable, there's proper meat, there's everything. There's a carbohydrate. You have a choice of one or the other. They eat a lot of pasta, but they don't eat 3 bowl of pasta and 2 bowl of ramen and all of that. So those are the things we have to
the problem, Sonia, is this. And really thank you for that explanation as to diabetes. These human sciences, there was never a thing, but I really clearly understand what you say. And I understand how that becomes a public health problem and a matter of public interest because it affects the public. But 2 things. Number one, how can, and I say we, meaning as a nation, as a society, as adults, how can we sell the things that are beneficial to health in a manner that is attractive to young people?
How can we sell them?
When I say sell, in terms of promote.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. I know several kids, and I think talking about before teenage years, yeah? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
School age.
They don't want mangoes. They don't want carrots. They don't want vegetables. They don't want any of those things. Yeah? They don't want any of those things, no matter how much you try to tell them it's good for you and so on. Yeah? And you know what they want. You know what they want. Yeah? So that's the first point.
Can I give you that one at a time? Because my brain kind of shallow. So, hear me. You already spoiled the child, okay? Children are poor. Remember that. They cannot provide for themselves.
But that's the second point. That's the second point I was actually coming to, because that's not really true. Because economists discovered generations ago, and of course, marketers have taken that information. They have discovered that in nearly any family, the children, the kids who earn no money at all, actually are the decision makers in terms of how the disposable income is utilized and spent. And that's just the reality.
Is it
And
a case of
that's why they target children.
so? Is it
That's
a
why
case
they
of
target children.
is it a
When you
case
go
of
to
the tail wagging the dog, or is it a case that we have not educated parents appropriately? We have generations that have grown up like that. Because you also hear parents say, "Oh me, I'm giving my children fig and saltfish. I grew up on fig and I grew up poor on fig and saltfish. I'm not eating that. I don't give my children that." And they take their children to the fast food place because it is they're financially able to do so. So we're gonna have to go, and like I told you in the beginning, it's a whole lot of different levels, from the individual to the family setting to the schools to the workplace, to the and because there are roles of different people in this in each category, and of course at the top to the policymakers. We have to figure out how we going to we probably have to redesign a message. I tell you, do you know, for example, in Mexico, you can import as much ramen as you want. The government say you're not to give children ramen. That's the law. The Mexicans put taxation on sugar sweetened beverages. The people who live on the mesa in the top part of Mexico have challenges because the water quality is poor. They tax the sugar sweetened beverages. The consumption of sugar sweetened beverages decreased, water increased, children's obesity dropped. So you're going to have not only people who can transmit the message appropriately. That is what health promotion is about. We're going to have all partners coming in on the same level, recognizing that what we have done so far has not been good enough for not even our children, but as for us, as we age, right? Because children, that's why childhood obesity is such a big problem, because obese children become obese adult. Obesity is the biggest risk factor to developing chronic diseases, including cancers. Obesity is the biggest risk factor to developing chronic diseases, including cancer, hypertension, diabetes, cancer, obese, you're on that track. So we're going to have to look and all work together and understand we're going to have to transmit the message fairly to parents, to schools, through the church, through whichever agency we find the heirs, right? Those voices are going to have to penetrate those levels to give the information, the truth, the real truth. The real truth is that it is bad. The real truth is that it is very bad.
I wanted to just hop in here, if I may. I wanted to share just a few reactions to the question, but also to some of the comments that Sonia was making. And I wanted to make the point, and coming back again to the importance of law. So there are many levers that have to be utilized. We have to push many levers, manipulate many levers in terms of trying to address this problem, because it's a complex problem and it's multifactorial. And law is an important one of them, but it's not the only one. And really what we're looking to do, including through the use of law, as one of those levers, is to re-socialize, right? This is not something, this change is not going to come overnight. We are teaching people again about what constitutes good nutrition. We're teaching people again about what constitutes a healthy weight. Because, we have those, so the traditional thing, you want to look nice and rosy, right? The baby look nice and rosy. So it's that socialization that has to take place. And so as Sonia was mentioning, there are many elements that go into that, whether it's education, using our health promotion people, etc., but also to then marrying that with law in the context of then creating the types of environments, as I was saying, that reinforce and make those decisions easier. Sonia was mentioning, the work that has been done in Mexico. And another example that we have is something like front of pack warning labels, right? If we had front of pack warning labels, and that would be a legislative response. If we had front of pack octagonal warning labels, something nice and simple, a black octagonal saying high in salt, high in sugar, high in fat, as the case may be, or a combination of those three, if it's all three that is high in, a lot of us would make different choices. A lot of us would make different choices. And so that's what we're getting at. That it's a difficult problem, but we got to start somewhere. And in that regard, we want to use all the tools that are at our disposal. And today we have tended to just fall back on the treatment part. And now we're saying, no, we have to do better than that. We have to now use some additional levers, including the law, where now we're pushing to change the environment so that as we're helping people helping re-socialize and re-educate persons, we're also then creating the environments that reinforce what they should be doing. Make the right decision, the easy and the simple decision to make. And then I also wanted to pick up and some of the points that Sonia was making about marketing. And we know that marketing is a real problem. And perhaps law is most powerful in this space, right? In terms of regulating of the marketing, because there's not really much else that you can use that can stop that besides the law saying you don't get to do it, or you can't do it in these areas, or you can't do it, and when we're talking about regulate, it can be, within the school environment, but also too, we have several countries in Latin America and the UK, etc., where things like broadcasting, certain ads can't be played on television during times when you know that kids will be watching, because from a nutritional point of view, because we don't want that negative messaging going out to them. And so we have seen in the context Barbados, as I said, we're pushing hard. We're trying to see if we could get there to legislation. But certainly, for example, just something as simple as the other day, our Minister of Educational Transformation, our Ministry of Education is the lead ministry for our school nutrition policy. And our Minister of Educational Transformation, the Honorable Chad Blackman, he made it clear. He made a statement. It was carried in the press. So I ain't telling the stories out of school. It was, out in the public. And he said his ministry will not be partnering with companies that do ultra processed foods, because those would be products that run counter to the school nutrition policy. And so he's saying we gonna need partnerships, and we welcome business coming on board, but understand that we are going to be critical. We are going to be looking at what you are bringing to the table through the lens of, does this fit with what we said that we want in the context of our school nutrition policy? And so one of the things that it is forcing us, well, this whole conversation is forcing us to do, is to look at alternatives. So we talk about, we know the marketing of sports, as Sonia was saying, is dominated by many of these brands that are, the sugar sweetened beverages, etc., or the fast food companies. And what we're saying is, let us begin that process. It's not going to be easy, but we got to start somewhere. So let us begin the process, for example, of exploring either health promoting or health neutral options. We've had some activities here where, for example, Sagicor, an insurance company, a health insurance, who they understand why this is important for them, because they're paying out the premiums all the time for the people in the hospital and the people, right? So they understand this is good business, right? If we help prevent, then we are managing the cost on our end. So we have credit unions, we have, a number of other players who are either health promoting, as we said, or health neutral. That might be the best you could get. But we need to begin to think outside of what is easy, what is comfortable for us, because we've always done it that way. They're very easy. These companies are always very keen to come and do the sponsorship, so you don't have to work too hard for it. They'll come and very willingly offer and say, no, we're taking a stand of a principled stand in terms of saying there's certain things that we don't want to be happening in terms of our children. And for these purposes, therefore, we are only going to have certain types of partnership, etc. And even their law can play a role beyond, below legislation. So legislation would be the highest level, yeah. But as I said, in Barbados right now, we just have a policy. We don't have formal legislation. But certainly I could see, for example, a role for law in terms of articulating agreements or guidelines for the types of partnerships that, what are the types of principles and what are the types of considerations and criteria that you should be factoring in. as you seek to partner, to promote X, Y, Z, as the case may be, in the context of letting it be something that is consistent with whatever is the health position that the government has made. So I just wanted to add those few quick comments to just complement some of what Sonia was saying, and also now wear my mummy hat because I have two boys. They're gonna kill me. I always call them their name. They're not very pleased with me about that. So I have a 17-year-old and I have a 12, almost 13-year-old. Yeah. So I live the battle, right? I live the
Yeah.
struggle. Yes. And what I will say is, in terms of the point you were making earlier, Mr. Layne, in terms of the kids don't want this, and they wanna gravitate towards the unhealthy stuff. I have found that, so for example, when you make certain foods available, like at my son's birthday party, I started doing food kebabs. So not no salad. I ain't do no salad, but a food kebab, right? So I ain't get the little sweetie thing, whatever. And you do something like strawberries or grapes or something that has still that same sort of that the kids would like. And in my house, at least, we are lovers of mango. I think in Barbados as a whole, we love mango a little bit too much because you overeat the mango, right? But I think that um, when you present options to to the kids in a way that is not competing with there's not all of this competing noise around, then it makes it easier for them to just engage with that project and realize, you know what, this food kebab ain't taste too bad at all. And another
That's
time I
all.
will go, the food kebabs disappeared at my son's birthday party. I mean, disappear. Every time I do them, they disappear, right? And so and we have some artists here, for example, who do some very creative things with food. They do these carvings and etc., or the infused water, that sort of a thing. So that I think we also have to be, even though it will not be easy, because our kids are accustomed to eating a particular way, and we know our tastes are predisposed towards that. But
Mhm.
we want to, just keep on introducing these things, and through law and other levers, we're going to create the spaces that will allow those choices then to be easier choices for them. And many times, for example, I say to my kids, "Is this or nothing?" Right? So choose how hungry you are, because it's this or nothing, right? Because we're not going that route. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we have in the school space, right? If we have a school nutrition policy that's working appropriately, we're going to have the food options, and then gradually, I mean, I remember when we first did the transition over to trying to fully implement our school nutrition policy here, and my son came home and he was like, "Mommy, they took out all the," he was like stunned. He was like, "You can't get any of this thing no more." And then, a few days later, he said, "But mommy, you know what? This thing that they had tasted really good,
Mhm.
whatever it was, because, he didn't really, now, maybe on his own, he might not have gone for that if the other stuff was still there. But no, the
Mhm.
other stuff wasn't there no more. And he
Mhm.
wanted something to eat. He went to the canteen. He took a chance, and it ended up tasting good.
Yeah.
So it's those low wins. I mean, all of this is anecdotal, of course, but it still goes to prove the point. As I said, that it is baby steps, but we have is to keep on moving and to keep on pushing, right? So that we don't go back, and then hopefully in another few years' time, we'll be having a
Yeah.
different conversation on this television show.
Right. I have a question, but before
No,
before
before you go, I want to just add one or two things quick to Nicole's statement. Let's not underestimate the power of our children. You hear? In 2020, when we did the school, the childhood obesity prevention consultation, I led that, and we had moved it from November 2019, because remember our teachers were on work to rule, and they weren't
Mhm.
doing anything outside. And then we moved it to January 2020. Thank God, because COVID came after that. I mean, COVID
Mhm.
caused shutdown. But We moved it and we begged the teachers at the schools that we invited, please follow the children, and they came. It made all the difference in our consultation. The children led. The children knew what was good for them because there was information. They know that they did not like, they know that the fried chicken and potato chips every day is not good. And they know that having constant sugar, they knew it wasn't good. And they asked, why are you guys not changing and giving us what is good for us? They know. Remember I told you about the individual level? Apart from that, when we were doing front of package warning labels, and you guys may have heard, although it wasn't very, very well published.
So I just hold on, because that's my question I want to come to
Okay.
ask.
Okay.
Before that, I just want to again recognize those who help us have this program every week. Jail Professional Solutions Inc., Gem FM carried this program on FM radio out of Canada, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, GTAL.
Attention all workers, your health and safety at work are critical. At Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union, we are dedicated to ensuring you have a safe and secure work environment. If you encounter unsafe conditions or are involved in an accident, take immediate actions. Report it to the company, your shop steward, and make sure it reaches your union. Your health and safety is a priority, and a strong union means a strong voice for your rights. Don't wait. Address concerns right away and protect your well-being. For a safer workplace and a better quality of life, stand with the Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. Together, we can create a safer, healthier work environment for everyone.
Yes, so what I wanted to ask was this, to ask Nicole. Given that in the case of Grenada, and I suspect Barbados too, but most of Grenada, maybe close to 100% of the culprits, the suspects we speak of in terms of these food items, nicely packaged and all of that. Given that they come from outside, what challenges are involved in seeking to have front of package warnings?
So, thanks. So we've had a long journey with this front of pack warning labels. I'm trying to get them as a regional standard within CARICOM. And really, so kind of where my international trade law hat now. I mean, the types of arguments that we've heard from industry, basically, and push back, oh, this is going to be too difficult. You know, as you said, these things come from outside. They're not going to put on labels for us. Da 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 da. What we have been able to, so it happens in Barbados, I'm sure it happens in Grenada. Every time crop over comes around, the biscuit things, the fast food, even the fast food things, the boxes, everything changed. The colors are different. They have the different packaging or whatever. Like Christmas time, the same thing. Easter time, the same thing, right? And so what we're saying is, okay, fine. If the exporter isn't going to do it, although they're doing it for other markets, so I don't know that we can assume they won't do it, because then they could just do it for everybody one time. But even if they don't do it, there's nothing stopping us doing the labels here. And so in the context of when they come into our territory, then before they go out into circulation, if you get what I mean, you would then have the label attack fixed. And it's not in the same way that our companies are able to change the packaging to send, because equally on the reverse end, some of our companies that export are exporting to markets where those labels are required.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I see here in Barbados, because depending on where your food is coming from, so a lot of times we get certain of the fast food stuff that comes in from Mexico or Colombia, both of whom have from the package warning labels. So I get you see the little container, and then you see the octagonal warning label there because it's something that came from Colombia. So it's just a matter of, I'm not suggesting that it is like you'll blink your eyes and magically everything would be able to be changed, but it's just a matter of putting a system in place and determining, you have the commitment that we're going to do these labels. And then you put the systems in place to allow that to happen. And then, of course, so for example, in Chile, when they introduced their front of package warning labels, what they did was to allow for a transition period, right? And so the all part of your policy and your legislation would take account of the fact that, in a sense, government has to walk alongside with business, sort of helping them to get to the stage where we can fully implement by, what would be a reasonable time frame. But it is not something that is insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. And we have seen how smaller countries within Latin America, so we know Chile is a fairly big economy. Mexico is a fairly big economy as well. But for example,
Uruguay
Uruguay, which is relative to the rest of them, would be small.
and
You get what
poorer.
I mean?
Hmm.
And they have shown, we have seen how they have been able to manage that in a way that, you get it done. But really, to my mind, the main stumbling block is will. We say where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, yes.
And so if we decide before we even start that we can't get it done because it suits our purposes to just keep on doing things the way how we, because the fear is, and is I guess a legitimate fear, that so many of the products would have these labels, right? So many of the products will have these labels. But that's exactly the point. Why do we have a market where so much of the products that we're selling to the individuals are unhealthy?
Unhealthy.
Why aren't we and in many instances, and this is where the law comes in again from a human rights perspective, right? Because we talk about your right to know. We talk, besides your right to life and your right to health and all of this stuff, you talk about your right to know.
You know.
And
Mhm.
so many times you pick up a product, it doesn't taste salty, it doesn't taste particularly sweet, right? And they have all of these different terms for sugar, right? So sometimes you might even look and you don't think it having sugar or
It
that
just says
much, if you get what I
carbohydrates.
mean.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
then you unwittingly consume, so you're thinking you're making a good choice, you feeling very proud of yourself. I mean, I remember some of the choices I made when my kids were babies, and I was feeding them ultra processed food, but it had all the labels about whole grain and good for baby and
Mm.
whatever it is, and I didn't know better at the time, so I was very consciously going into a supermarket and thinking I was making a healthy choice for my children. It's a little bit more expensive, but I'm gonna pay that extra few dollars because my kids' health is worth it or whatever. And then to
Mm.
find out now, I'm like, shut up, shock. Imagine I was feeding you all of this stuff all of that time. And
Yeah.
so these things like the labeling and all of these things help us realize, and then listen, and this is why I say it's not a matter of taking away people's choice or trying to be a dictatorship or a nanny state. Because when you have the three labels there, guess what? It's still there in the supermarket. If you want to pick it up, you can still pick it up. But at
Mhm.
least you won't be picking it up thinking, I'm making a great choice for my kids and my household because I'm choosing the healthier option. You will understand that you're choosing something that high in salt, fat, and sugar, or a combination of that, and that you're willing to live with that. And then that's fine. That's a choice that you made because, as we said, even though the environment is really, really important and made such a big difference in terms of the choices we make, there is still some level of individual responsibility, right? So we let the individual choose at the end of the day. As I say, I tell my children, well, they don't have no choice. Their choice is eat it or don't eat it or don't eat, right? But I'm a little extreme.
No, you sound like
But
our parents.
As far as you know, has there been any study which indicates the impact of front of package warnings on the use of any product?
absolutely. So as
Yeah.
I said, we have been in these trenches for quite a while, and so one of the arguments that we got early in the game, like 2018, 2019, when we were first starting the conversation, was that, oh, but all of this evidence that y'all have, because as Sonia pointed out, Mexico has front of part labels, Chile, a number of the Latin countries,
Argentina. Mm.
and they have the evidence to show how it has positively impacted, on consumer choices and those sorts of things. And so the response we got was like, oh, but that's for Latin America. And I'm like, okay, but we're all human beings. Sugar works the same way in our bodies and our brains work the same way, but okay, fine. And so we actually had Jamaica, in collaboration with PAHO and the university, UTEC. They did a study on front of part warning labels, did a randomized study within Jamaica, and the results were absolutely in alignment with all the other evidence, which was to say that the front of part, so they had, it was the front of part warning labels, the orthogonal warning labels, it was
The
the
street light one.
the traffic light, and
Uh-huh.
then on with the GDA one that the US does, right? And they would have asked them questions like, they would have assessed things like the ease of use, how accurate it was in terms of, when you think you're making a healthy choice, are you actually making a healthy choice, etc. And hands down, I mean, the front of part warning labels, the orthogonal warning labels outperformed all other systems by far. And this was in Jamaica. And then we had also, too, then a few years, maybe like 2021 or so, PAHO did one of these, when they can do these studies where they project how much you would save if you had introduced something. So you haven't done it yet, but they're working out whether they will really be cost effective. And similarly, and so they did it for Barbados. And I forget how many millions of dollars, but it was a whole lot of millions of dollars that they were able to project would be saved in terms of, then the better choices, etc., that would have taken place. So we very definitely, we have a lot of evidence globally, but then also too, we have gone to the trouble of doing studies specific to the Caribbean in response to the pushback that we were getting. And not surprisingly to us at all, those studies, which were free of conflict of interest and all of those things, um, absolutely confirm or give us results very similar to what we're seeing globally. So we know that from the part warning labels work, the orthogonal warning labels work.
So when we were trying to when we had the media launch of the front of package, looked like a black stop sign. Okay. Warning labels. We had an event in St. George's in front of Bruce Street Mall, Esplanade Mall, and we were just doing qualitative research, just asking people questions, right? And I said to mothers, if you went to the supermarket to buy, what do you buy your children for snacks? I buy XYZ. If you went to the supermarket and it had a sign, that black sign at the front that says high in sugar, would you buy it? No. You crazy? No, sir. I wouldn't buy that for my child. But I said, but you have been buying it. And to substantiate on what Nicole said, the Argentinians we buy sweetie from them, candy, because our people here claimed that when they do the little pack of sugar cake or they do a little, the small packages of whatever the produce they're selling, they won't have a place. Sweetie, one individual sweetie has the front of package one label on it, the black hexagonal thing, and you open it and see a two. What comes with that is education, information to John public that here, this is what that means. That is what that means. And if you eat this is how it goes. This is, if you eat this, that's what. So it doesn't come isolatedly. It comes with other things. And again, at different levels, education, especially health education is very important, right? It comes collaborating because we don't produce very much. What we're producing is bread and biscuit and sugar cake, okay, and sodas. But and like some of the home the cottage industry, like jams and jellies and stuff, we don't produce the things. We depend on distributors, right? But if people are not buying what distributors are selling because they understand that this is not good for them, distributors are going to have to look for the markets. They're going to have to ask their providers, the producers, to fix it up. And I don't know if you have seen, I have seen changes in formulation, because that's one of the problems. People say, oh, we have to change the formulation. We do X, we do Y, we do Z, right? We got to change how much sugar we put into it. It's not going to taste as good. But I have seen it in some of the crackers. I've seen it in some of the salt, in some of our tin meat that already, because there are things I don't buy, but somebody gives you and you have it in your house, you try to, you have reduced your salt. I've seen products have already. So they're just waiting that when there's legislation, they're already making the changes. When there's legislation, they say, "Whoop, here comes the front of package warning label." And that is why it's so important for the leaders, or people who make legislation, who have the ultimate responsibility for providing for appropriate health care, to understand how important their input, their decision making is in maintaining the health of a population and in preventing diseases like diabetes and hypertension, and above all, in maintaining a population productive, keeping the wealth of a population, being able to invest it in other areas than having to just pay for healthcare, right? And making people live longer, giving us longer, happier lives. One of the things that our government has done and is very important is the introduction and development of the sports councils in communities. Last week, I heard of a program where the government is they're training physical education teachers. That means that they go back into the school. One of the things that is going to have to happen is that physical education, while it is now a theoretical subject, is going to have to be like when we went to school. You have 1 or 2 classes of PE every day. Our children need to run up and down an hour every day, 60 minutes of running up and down. We have them sit down playing games and eating lunch and chatting foolishness on their phone. Okay? Our children need to be active, and putting all of these things back into the curriculum is going to make a difference. Okay? Because like I tell you, if you take bus from down the hill to go up to convent, something is wrong. I didn't even know you could take bus to do that when I went to convent. But
Yeah, of
we're
course,
going to
yes.
have to introduce physical literacy as a part of how we, as well, as Grenadians in general, and as Caribbean people, and Grenadians in particular, and Caribbean people in general, introduce physical activity in our lives as a means of well-being, and that is going to happen. And I want to thank the Ministry of Sports for that move, so that sports is not just a matter of thing of taking out the 6 children who could run very well out of the 1,000 children who go into schools every year.
I wanted to just on that point of reformulation as well, just to point out that we have seen just about 2 days ago in the newspaper, in fact, the head of our Barbados National Standards Institution was making the point that he has been seeing, they have, from a standards point of view, they have been having several manufacturers, particularly smaller manufacturers, sort of in response to what they're seeing in the environment as the government is sending out more and more cues that is serious about, taking steps to regulate, to policy, to legislation, as the case may be, because like I said, the taxation, etc., is done through legislation, that they're serious about this thing, that they have been reaching out to the standards institution more and more about reformulating, about how they can change up, how they can, maintain quality, but at the same time adjust what they're doing so that they are able to navigate the space a little bit more effectively in terms of offering a healthier product. So it's very true that, there's an untapped, in a sense, opportunity there, for us in terms of our producers exploring. And I'm not saying everybody is going to be able to overnight make $1 million now out of going healthy. But what I'm saying is we have to explore, as one door closes or as it seems to be closing, what you need to do is to be looking and see about what opportunity perhaps does this present for me to pivot and perhaps, reformulating something. Of course, we don't want them reformulating that they're putting in, additives and, other things. We want them reformulating in a way that keeps
A
the
healthy
product
way.
healthy or as minimally processed. But we are definitely, as I said, it was just in the newspaper about 2 days ago. He was talking about how, as the head of the standard institution, he is so excited, because it seems to him that there's a certain energy in the space right now as the small enterprises are really sort of stepping up to the plate in terms of trying to meet that challenge of pivoting and recreating their products in a healthier lane.
Uh, Let me ask, any resources, input uh, provided by Power WHO in this regard? Anything that nations could access that we have not been accessing
You mean in
as far
terms of reformulation?
at all aspects of the challenge?
Okay. So certainly there's a whole on reformulation. No, I don't think we have anything on reformulation per se, because of course that will be a little bit outside of PAHO's remit, which because that's more business as opposed to
Yeah.
the core health. Um, but there is a whole lot. So this whole conversation that we are having in the Caribbean, has started through our relationship with PAHO. So there's a lot of, as I said, PAHO has done the study in Jamaica. All of these things are available on the PAHO website and the WHO website. So you have the study that PAHO did with UTEC in Jamaica on front of part warning labels. There was actually an academic article that was published in a peer-reviewed journal about the performance. We have also the study that they did for Barbados, as I said, in terms of projecting the gains, economic gains, if it were that Barbados was to introduce front of part warning labels. They have there is a lot of information about school nutrition policies. So both PAHO and UNICEF have been doing a lot of work in this area in terms of from a rights perspective. So children's right to health, right to education, right to life. Why creating why schools in particular need to be health promoting and not spaces where kids are bombarded by these negative messages. So between UNICEF's website as well as the WHO just came out with new guidance. Both them and UNICEF just came out with new guidance on marketing of unhealthy food and beverages to children. That was in 2023. They have a 2010 guide that so 2010 we in 2025, so 15 years that guide has been all of this available on their website, where they go through and step by step take the policymakers and others, because they explain the reasoning behind it, etc., what it is you want to cover, what should marketing cover, and why these things are problematic, why it is that we're saying that the capture has to be as broad as it is. It's not just the actual sale, but also the promotion, the sponsorships, the scholarships. We talked about school and sports, right? But another big problem area is the scholarships. So we have a lot of these companies that are in our schools, providing scholarships to students, etc. And we understand that that's a real need. And so,
Mhm.
so they're trying to explain why that is problematic for those companies to do it, and how, you might want to be exploring some other alternatives. And that's why, as I said, Healthy Caribbean Coalition, we had, I act as policy advisor with Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and 15th of last month, yeah, the 15th of last month, we had a really useful workshop on commercial about conflict of interest, but basically looking at commercial determinants of health and managing that. And one of the things that we've committed to do, because it comes up all the time, is to try to create some sort of a database, some sort of a repository, a listing, a starting point for alternatives to the current sponsorships, because that sponsorship problem is a really serious one.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah, it is.
really problematic one, because you can't say that people don't get your education. Governments have limited funds, and we
Mhm.
understand that we want the best for our kids, so we want them to be able to, you know, get this scholarship, whether it's a sports or educate academic one, etc. So we really are hoping to work along with our schools and our ministries to help identify some alternatives, so that we're not just closing doors on people and seeming like if we're unconstructive and disconnected, to be frank, but that we are showing we understand that the struggle is real, and we're trying to find ways in which we can help you to do better.
And there's also CARFA. Let's not forget CARFA, the Caribbean
Yes,
Public
of
Health
course.
Agency, that does a lot of research. CARFA has recently and will more extensively launch their policy on salt, reduction of salt in relation to PAHO's, in relation to WHO's request. And I remember working on that policy. And we went to Canada, where the Public Health Canada had actually worked with the companies that produced meat, salty meat, and other agencies, because you don't have to see everybody, but you have to collaborate with the areas where there's greatest interest or there's greatest participation in what did Public Health Canada do? They got to work with the guys, gave them a chance to reduce because remember salt have two functions: preservation, but also flavor. You don't want to lose any of those. But how low can you go? And we know that sometimes it's just a matter of flinging salt in the pot, right? Or putting salt in there. If you ask the Argentinians how they got salt down in their bread, they will tell you they went again to a few of the agents, a few of the companies that did bread, and say, how much salt you put in? We don't know. We just put salt in the pot. Okay, can we start to reduce it? The population did not, neither there nor in Canada, they did not recognize the difference in the content in amount of salt. If you do it, reduce it slowly. The point where it's safe, right? The gradual reduction. And they have not gone back. And they have been working with the public health agencies to ensure. What did we see in Argentina? Certainly we saw decrease in hypertension, in blood pressure for the population who are using the bread with less salt. And the bread to them was just as nice. So it has to be collaborative. It can't be draconian. It can be, because we're going to lose. If you fight, you can't fight where you don't have power. But it must be collaborative and working together. But it must also be collective and in the interest of the well-being of a population. That is what we're going to have to promote all the time. How long? And like I tell them, dead people don't buy nothing, okay? They don't even buy them coffee. Dead people buy nothing, okay? So if you're going to kill a population, by giving them the things that are not good for them, who's going to buy? If everybody gets sick prematurely, if everybody dies prematurely, and commercial agents want to make money. So we have to collaborate in the interest of the well-being of our population.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been thinking about as we've been having discussion, because we mainly focus on children, and I started it, but I wanted to backtrack a bit on alcohol, and especially rum and alcohol consumption in the Caribbean and the effects of consuming alcohol and diabetes. I think that is something that isn't talked about a lot. And I'd like us to touch on that a bit. And Dr. Nixon and Mrs. Forster, both of you had a reaction. So I think that this would be this would be a question that either of you will be able to help and assist us on. And I think Dr. Nixon, it would be good to start with you from the health perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, first of all, there's law that prevents us from giving children rum. But everybody give their children rum from early because we give them Christmas cake. We introduce our children very early to alcohol. Alcohol tastes nice, but alcohol is also a source of sugar. And people who consume lots of alcohol don't really eat the other things that are necessary. We've seen a lot of our men becoming amputees early because if you consume, how much calories you think in a bottle of beer? How much it is? Like 200 in a 6-ounce bottle of beer. The higher the content, the higher the volume of alcohol in the beer, the more calories there are in the beer. So a light beer would not have as many calories as it. But people who drink, just drink. And you would drink 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 drinks on a night on your own party, or during the day, however you drink. And it's also, what we find is that people who have diabetes and drink tend to have an earlier chance of having amputations because they just consume alcohol and nothing else. So the whole nutritional state is really good. So in relation to our children, there is a control. Our children are not supposed to be drinking. Don't give them Christmas cake with rum in it, okay? Because it kind of sets up their brain to want to consume alcohol as they go along. But alcohol and diabetes are probably the worst thing. And it's funny because we haven't spoken about diabetes and hypertension, which is Bonnie and Clyde. Two of them together will shoot out everybody and thief everything that is your life, right? But alcohol is a challenge because do you know that we probably make the best rum in the world? We know that, right? Starting with Mungie, the number one. rum in the world. No, it was the first. But we consume 40% of the alcohol that that we make, and we're not 40% of the world population. We in the Caribbean, and we're not talking about a spoon of ice and those things. We're talking about rum. Okay, we consume 40% of the alcohol that is made in the Caribbean. Something is wrong with that, right? When you consider what population consumes that large volume of alcohol. So we see that alcohol, and because alcohol is sugar, rum is made from sugar, basically, right? How do we control our patients? We don't, unless we really can get into them. We have to provide facilities for alcohol rehab, detox and rehab, which is a very difficult thing. People who try to get off drinking can die if they don't have appropriate medical facilities, and that's one of the chances. We're going to have to reinstate Alcoholics Anonymous for support, because people who decide they're not going to drink and remain within a rehabilitative environment, that is probably 80% of people who go into alcohol rehab, 75 to 80, do not go back, do not consume. So alcohol is one of the big problems, and sometimes you don't look at it. Alcohol actually comes with something else, which diabetes comes with, and that's depression. We do not speak of depression, right, in diabetes, but it is one of the symptoms that other countries, first world countries, follow, right? Depression is a big symptom of diabetes that we in our little part of the world, we have so much other problem with limb loss and all the rest of it, and that we tend not to focus on depression. But when people depressed, they also drink, especially our males. So we get caught in a catch-22 situation, and that I don't think we as equipped as a region to deal with the complexities, and we're going to have to find a way to deal with that. I hope
Okay,
that
so
answers your question more or less.
I'll pick up and compliment what Sonia said. Now, from a sort of technical legal perspective, um, so we do have in the context of so definitely alcohol is always a problem, right? It's always difficult to deal with because of the context, right? Our history, our culture. Barbados, part of what we brand Barbados as, is the home of rum. It was discovered. Rum was first made in Barbados, right? That's one of the things we leverage in the context of our branding of the country, and so it's all of that we deal with, and just the social context as well. Your lineman who's lying without something a little alcoholic, right? Um, but I want to start so understanding that there's that challenge, right? Um, the World Health Organization and PAHO have a program. So they always come up with these evidence-based programs that of how we can tackle these problems, right? So tobacco is empower, and that stands for different things in terms of how we regulate tobacco. And for alcohol, they have something called the Safer program, right? Safer, which addresses the whole range, the whole gamut of activities. And actually, law is relevant in pretty much all of them. So one of them is, for example, access, right? So Sonia would have spoken to that. So we pass legislation and say certain people don't get access to alcohol, right? But the area in which, much like with food, it's always the same problem area, right? Much like with food, one of the areas that the WHO program speaks to, which is the E, is enforce bans on the advertising, promotion, and sponsorship by alcohol. And that is an area in which we've really fallen down within the region. We have to do better. We have to do better. We understand that it will not be easy to do better because of the context, but don't matter how difficult the journey is, it's a
And
journey
you,
we have
you,
to
you're
walk.
speaking about advertising overall, or advertising targeted
So
at
for
children?
example, so advertise, so if you think about, so you want to get, if you think about something like tobacco, remember once upon a time, I'm old enough that I remember when at cricket and all of these things, you would
Yep.
have all the tobacco companies would have their advertising all around,
Yep.
right? And then we got the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And one of the things it said is that you couldn't have sponsorship and advertising and stuff like that of by tobacco companies. And so my kids have grown up in an era where they've never seen those things advertised, right? The only thing they would see is the cigarette box, the box in the supermarket,
Supermarket. Mm-hmm.
but you wouldn't have the advertising. Now, whether we will get to the level of tobacco, who knows? But that's kind of what you have in mind, right? So it's not so prevalent and so present all around you. Yeah. We want to pay attention to who's sponsoring what, right? Because of course, with the sponsorship comes the name going out there. Another area that is problematic and needs regulating in terms of law is, in terms of this whole area of marketing and sponsorship is this whole the new line, the new marketing line now of the zero alcohol beer and the zero alcohol whatever, but it is the same alcoholic brand, right? So you're still building the brand loyalty. You're still having that feel good experience, connecting with the child now. And then as they go into adulthood, they transition over into the full-fledged alcoholic beverage. And so
Just
we
like
don't really,
vaping.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
like vaping.
we don't
The
have
smokers.
the types of regulation that's an area where we're basically starting at point zero, for understandable reasons. But I will say again, this program is taking place at a very timely point when a lot of things have been happening just before. So the end of last month, our National NCD Commission here in Barbados, I sit on the National NCD Commission, and we had an NGO forum. And the theme for that forum was alcohol harms and the commercial determinants of health. And one of the things we had is our Minister of Health, our Minister of State with responsibility, he's within the Health Ministry, he has responsibility for NCDs. And what he has said is that the government is committing to a 10% reduction. So they're putting certain targets. They're trying to begin to tackle this problem. He's talking in terms of the harmful use of alcohol. We know now that WHO and PAHO said there's no safe level of alcohol consumption. But I mean, I think for the Caribbean, we got to take baby steps, right? So we want to at least get to a point where we are at least putting regulations in place. So we do have taxation in place on alcohol. It's not at the level which WHO recommends that it should be. But we have the taxation measures in place. We do have some level of regulation from legislation in relation to availability. So, you need your liquor license, you're not supposed to sell to children, etc. But those areas could definitely be beefed up as well. But now we need to move more into the space of the sponsorship and promotion, and get some regulations, some regulations going there. And then just even things like, we had a situation where at Carrie Festa, one of the events they had, alcoholic beverage was one of the sponsors, and it just so happened that some kids were on the stage performing, and right behind them was this ad for this alcoholic brand. And a friend of mine took a picture and sent it to me and said, "What madness is this? What are we doing?" Because here are these little kids performing, and right behind them is this big ad for this alcoholic brand. I don't think it was deliberate. I think it just happened, right? But what we want is that we have much more considered, informed decision making being made around things like that. So in a sense, we have our checklist, and we're going through when it comes to alcohol to make sure that we are regulating it a little bit better. Also, too, I think in this space in particular, education is really key in a way that maybe is not as key in some of the other areas. Because I think people understand, that about food and eating well more than they do about the harms of alcohol. So, for example, at our NCD forum, many of our NGO forum, many of the NGOs there said that was the first time they realized that they learned that there's a link between alcohol consumption and breast cancer. They didn't know, well established link, well documented. You
And
know,
in younger women.
just didn't know. And so
Hmm.
they were like, "Oh my goodness, we're going to go out and like spread the word now that we know." So I
Hmm.
think a lot, because alcohol has been so much a part of our culture, and we kind of grew up with it all around us. And as you said, the brands are iconic and they're part of our national identity and all of these things. We don't understand that there is, in fact, a very sort of dark side to it in terms of the
Mhm.
potential health the health
Challenges. Mm.
impacts. And so we really do need, in addition to the regulation, we need the regulation, absolutely. But in a sense, I think almost before that, we have to do a lot more sensitization and education in terms of helping persons understand why it is important for the government to step into this space, why we do need law in this space to restrict how alcohol is marketed and how it is targeted, etc., so that we can ensure that we have healthier lives for our kids, but also for the society as a whole.
We
Let
also
me
have to consider conflict of interest, commercial determinants. So there's an agency that covers the alcohol companies, which actually sponsors education for our primary school children against consumption of alcohol. You heard that, right? But
repeat
you
it.
know,
I
we,
heard it. I heard it.
that's another forum in Grenada,
Yes.
right? And that's, I think that's the greatest form of conflict of interest because they've targeted our children. And it's one thing to tell, I can tell you, do not eat the apple, but leave the apple there for you to eat. You will eat the apple.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with the whole issue, which is going to become a bigger issue, although it seems so benign currently, and I've been talking about it a lot. The whole use of vapes among our children. Today, you will inhale strawberry and pineapple and watermelon and stuff flavor. Tomorrow, you're going to be inhaling nicotine, and the next day, you're going to be smoking tobacco. The fact that the tobacco companies are the ones who monopolize the distribution of vapes among our children, and parents think it's benign, it's just a flavor. The truth is, it's already doing damage. In breathing in hot air into your lung will make your lung turn like a bag of popcorn, popped corn, not just popcorn, popped corn, right? And those are challenges that we face as we come to deal with chronic diseases. And we talk about diabetes, but as we come to deal with chronic diseases, we're going to have those challenges. Also, remember that smoking is one of the biggest, tobacco is one of the biggest challenges to our diabetics because the nicotine in the tobacco actually causes hardening of the arteries. You already have challenges that your red blood cells can't move in to give oxygen, and then you have all these hardened arteries because of nicotine. Guess what? You're going to lose your feet. You're going to get blind. You're going to get strokes. You're going to get heart attacks, and your kidneys are going to die just the same way if you smoke.
Okay. Okay. But let me ask this: is there any benefit from the use of alcohol?
No,
No, no.
I'm serious.
No, I asked when as you know,
I'm serious.
I don't consume alcohol at all, but I have heard even medical people say that a certain moderate use is could be beneficial. That's why I just asked.
Nicole mentioned it. Nicole, repeat what you said earlier.
No, no, so I'm not the doctor here. I going based on what I've heard from WHO, etc. So
Yeah.
I understand. And indeed, our health minister actually also referenced it in his speech that he gave his intervention at the NGO forum. And so we know that we have gone out. Certainly, I grew up hearing about how a little bit of red wine is good. Like it's good for your heart and it's good for this thing. And what the minister explained in his speech, and I know it's consistent with what is currently the health position from both PACO and
The
WHO,
mantra, right? And
which is
WHO.
that there is no
Safe level
safe level of consumption of
consumption.
alcohol.
Even one drink a day.
Any consumption of alcohol of any kind is a risk in terms of these NCDs, etc. And the point that the minister made in his speech is that he is reliably informed by his technicians that whatever little supposed benefit you got even with the red wine was really more to do with the oxidants within the wine, and you don't need wine for that. You could get that from something else, and then you don't have the negative effects of the alcohol. So my understanding is, as I said, right now the position is based on the science. The WHO has moved, so we it was evolving, and we know science is evolving something, right? It's not exact. As we learn more, we do better. And so we started off talking about the harmful use of alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and so we were saying, well, if you don't overdo, you'll be okay. And then as they did more and more studies, they
Research,
found
right?
that no, it doesn't matter. Even small levels of exposure mean that they're health risks, and therefore, as a health institution, we're just taking the position that you should, if you haven't started drinking, don't start. And
No, I
if you
wouldn't.
have
I'm
a
too old to
regimen
start
start,
now.
try to reduce
And I
and
have a lot of strong reasons for that start.
off.
So the answer is still no.
Yes, okay.
So
I just,
go ahead, go ahead.
but somebody has actually pastoral consumption is acceptable.
No. No. Let me tell you what it is. Let me tell you what the challenge is. They did a research, and I've been speaking about this thing for like 3 years because I booked up that study from the UK that showed that young women consuming alcohol develop breast cancer earlier. So they were seeing these 20 somethings in the UK coming on with breast cancer, and the only common fact, well, the apparent factor was related to the consumption of alcohol, right? And like Nicole says, the research is showing that there is no safe consumption level of alcohol. And not all people drink real alcohol. Some people drink grape juice at church. We don't, but a lot of the evangelicals just drink grape juice or alcohol free wine, whatever it is, whatever that is. There's no alcohol free wine, but wine is an alcoholic beverage. So that is something that even I guess the church will have to reconsider what they give to their population if they put them at risk. Although the Catholic Church has a different belief as to what it is that you're drinking.
Yeah, okay. Let me just ask, in terms of smoking, use of tobacco, am I correct in saying that over the last few decades there have been a great dent in terms of the use, and that is as a result of the sustained campaign against smoking?
So
Go, Nicole.
I would say that globally, we've certainly seen, so the Framework Convention on Tobacco came into force in 2005. Um, and pursuant to that, we've had all of this, these campaigns, as you said, regulating, sponsorship, advertising, all of these things. And we've definitely seen results. What I would say though is that in the Caribbean, um, we still have quite a ways to go in terms of the types of measures that are supposed to be put in place to really ensure that we lock down this thing. And what certainly my sense of things is that we've maybe got a little complacent. And so, like I said, my kids have grown up, for example, without all the advertising and stuff like that. So I think, we were just discussing this the other day, some colleagues and I, in that we maybe need to start again re-educating people again about, what we started doing when we first had the convention, because persons are not necessarily as on it and understanding as they used to be. And in this regard, the other important sort of new development, which could potentially seriously undermine whatever gains have been made in terms of regulation of tobacco consumption, is vaping. And we're seeing high levels of vaping among our youth.
Children, primary school children.
Yeah.
And a lot of, within our schools, etc., we have parents and stuff like that don't even, I mean, as I told you, I have a 17-year-old son, and he's like, everybody vapes, and and they say, oh, but It's not tobacco. It's not
It's
nicotine.
strawberry. It's strawberry water.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's done in flavors. It's very clearly targeting children because the flavor, they have the flavors, the fruity flavors, the thing. They have pretty colors. They have it like a lipstick, something, all of that sort of stuff. So I think we have a new battle in relation to tobacco. It may not be so the tobacco battle has changed shape. I
Yeah.
think we still very much still have a strong tobacco. So we still have a ways to go in terms of the traditional battle. So for example, things like graphic health warnings. St. Lucia has their graphic health warnings. I must tell you, Barbados does not.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So
Even though we passed our legislation quite some while ago. And so and throughout CARICOM, we are really very, very far behind Latin
yeah,
America terms of implementing, overall the obligations there within the framework convention. But then over and above that, as I said, in a sense, to me, even more concerning is this new battle where
the vaping.
the whole tobacco scene has taken on a different shape, which has a level of acceptability that is scary because people are thinking, oh, but this is different to smoking a cigarette, and it actually, you're opening yourself up to some real health problems in that regard. As I said, doubly concerning about it is the its prevalence among our youth. And so we're going to have a whole generation of people coming up vaping, and with all the health challenges that presents. So we definitely still do have whatever maybe have been the initial impacts in terms of reduction in smoking levels, which we are happy about and congratulate. We still have to keep our eye on the price
And the
because
wall, yes, it can
So,
become
not
complete.
we
so
haven't completed
the
it
Grenada
yet.
system is a little different. And while we are signatory to the fair, the whole convention on tobacco control, we we have seen in among the adolescent in adolescent research that there has been an uptake in tobacco use,
Wow.
and
Is that
that's
so?
not cute. Yes.
Uh,
And it's probably because, just like Nicole said, we have not really taken on the activities that are required to control tobacco use. So we see young people who are not necessarily adolescents, but people who are 18 and 19 has become fashionable again to smoke. And that is a challenge.
okay,
And it means
okay.
that younger children will get access to tobacco.
I didn't
Um,
pick that up.
no,
There is
I'm
a
telling you
question
from
here.
no, no,
Somebody
no. I'm
is
telling you
saying,
from research from
no,
the
no, no, I'm not
from
doubting you. I'm just saying
yeah.
I don't
And what is even more challenging is that our females
mm,
are taking it
yes,
on, right?
yeah, okay.
Just as they are the ones
In
who
terms
drink
of the
it.
drinking
Our
too.
young
Yes.
females consume more hard alcohol than the men, than the guys. They drink hard.
Right. I guess
Okay,
that's a sociological issue also.
that's a
But
sociological issue.
someone is saying certain religion considers smoking a prohibitive substance as a sacrilege. I guess it means sacred. What say you? Give me a medical opinion.
What, you mean smoking?
No, no, I guess the person is talking about the use of ganja.
You see, but I don't want to go there because I
Okay,
think the
good.
use of
Good. No
no. Let
problem.
me tell you, I don't want to go there because I think since we're on the brink of what's say the term on decriminalizing the use of
Yes,
cannabis.
it's a certain
And I
quantity.
still, no, I personally, and I've said it, and I'll say it here, I'm not happy with the fact that we have not engaged the population in a in a in an educative way as to what exactly it means and the challenge of smoking cannabis.
Yeah,
This is not a free reign to smoke tobacco, and there is going to have to be that thing done. It's not because we're going to decriminalize cannabis does not mean that everybody can smoke.
yeah.
And we
I
need
think
to tell people.
what I get
So,
as with many things, including what we are discussing here tonight, is to
uh,
strike that balance between people having their freedoms and at the same time pursuing and furthering the public interest. I think that's
yes,
what is
Exactly.
really about.
and,
Yeah,
and,
it's
and
about
yes,
striking a
and
balance.
yeah,
Yes.
but there must also be a balance, and there must also be the a space that's open so people can have information to make informed
And that's part
decisions,
of striking the balance. Like we
right?
speak about the food with the front, the front package wallets. That's
Mm-hmm.
part of striking the balance. You can use it, but you need to know this is the
Exactly.
problem. So you do it
Yeah.
informed. Uh, so just before we end, once again, I just want to recognize the sponsors of the program, Jail Professional Solutions, in Gem FM carried it out of Canada on FM radio, and also Grenada Technical and Allied Workers Union. So we want to end now in a few minutes, but we just want to invite closing comments, and we'll maybe do it in the reverse order this time. Nicole, we have you first.
Okay. So thanks very much once again. It was a wonderful opportunity to share. I hope if it's one thing that persons take away, I hope they now leave with a better understanding of the role that law can play and why it is important for us to
Mhm.
move the conversation from treatment to prevention,
Yeah,
and how law is the key tool for making that happen. And it's
yeah,
not about somebody trying to take away your rights, but in fact, creating spaces where you can fully enjoy those rights and your children can fully enjoy those rights.
right. Doctor?
So again, thank you guys for inviting me. Nicole, it was really a pleasure working with you. And thank you for to the host. You know, diabetes is real, and diabetes is out there and really damaging our population. We don't intend to frighten, but information where we are is in a frightening space. So sharing knowledge and information might seem that it's scary, but it is our current truth. Diabetes will shorten our lives. There's a lot of information. One of the things I wanted to say that I tell everybody, if your mom is diabetic and your father is diabetic, you have a 75% chance of developing diabetes, right? But you also have a 25% chance of not developing diabetes. So carpe diem, seize the day and choose what you have to choose. Also, we recognize that we're going to have to deal with across the board, me, my family, and go up as far as it is, and understand that legislation that is put in place is only in the interest of the well-being of our population. We're not we're not trying to stem anybody's rights, but we're trying to make sure that you have a right to the best life and the longest life that you can have. Asking people, I'm going to make a plea here that our population screens, go check your sugar, get into the good lifestyle. It doesn't cost us anything to exercise, and look and see what is the information the Diabetes Association is affording the Minister of Health and other people, my physician, in order so that I can live long. So I'm looking at this as a physician, but as a public health physician, how can I make my country better? How can I avoid the wealth of my country going only into caring for diabetes? How can I make sure that I can go where I can pretend? What is my responsibility as an individual in the whole issue of the whole diabetes pan issue? Thank you.
Fantastic. Aisha?
I would just like to thank both of you for the very engaging discussion this evening. I realized that you were we're both very passionate about it. And I think
Mhm.
that passion has come through this evening. And it was an enjoyable program. I learned a lot and a lot of things left to consider as well. So thank you both and have a good evening.
Thank
Yes,
you
thank
again.
you. Thank you all. It was 2 hours well spent. Thank you very much. Nicole,
Night.
Okay,
thank you
good night.
once
Good
again,
night
Sonia.
all.
Aisha,
Nicole,
good night.
Nicole,
Nicole,
you're
those
going to
who
be invited again, so don't think
watch
that
the
you're going to get
program.
lost in Barbados.
All right, nice. We try to, as I said, we try to do these type of programs, everyday life, but how the law fits into it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you for those
Good
who
night,
view.
everyone. Yeah.
Good night
Okay,
all.
okay,
Bye
bye,
bye.
guys. Bye.